Raider Nation, what's good? Merrick here. Welcome into another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. The Raiders are finally on the bye week, but there's still plenty to talk about regarding this team. For starters, the trade deadline is just under 2 weeks away, and because of that, the rumor mill is off and running. As always, Maxx Crosby's name is getting thrown into the hat, and so is Jakobi Meyers as well. So today, we will dive into that. Do I think either one of them or both of them gets traded? I'll offer up my informed take on the matter. Plus, we're catching up with Raiders digital reporter Levi Edwards for his take on the first 7 weeks of the season for the Silver and Black and getting his analysis on where they go from here. All of that and more is coming your way on today's show. All right, guys, now before we get it rolling, I want to remind you to check us out online at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to our free newsletter, which drops on Monday and Friday mornings. On Monday, we take a deep dive into the game from Sunday, breaking it down from every angle, and on Friday, we preview the matchup and review the biggest Raiders storylines ahead of the weekend. Again, it is free, zero cost, and it's a great way to support the channel. Check it out and get your friends to subscribe as well. We'd really appreciate that. In the meantime, though, guys, let's talk some trades, okay? Trade deadline is coming up in about 2 weeks here. So as the bye week rolls around and people realize the Raiders aren't doing well, they're 2-5, all this different stuff, and the rumor mill starts swirling. Well, yesterday at practice, we caught up with Jakobi Meyers, one of the guys whose name has been thrown into the hat, not only by himself, but a lot of other people as well. He said before the season started that he wanted to be traded after he didn't agree to a deal with the team. They couldn't come to terms on something. He's obviously in the last year of his contract. So he wants to go somewhere where he can sign a long-term deal and have some stability, not only for himself, but his family as well. And I know these guys are making millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, they want stability for everyone involved on their end. They want to know where they're going to end up for a while. And that's something that's important to him, especially a guy at his age and this stage of the game for him too. So he wants to get that figured out. Well, yesterday we talked to him, and he said that he does still want to get traded. He threw his name into the hat there, but he said at the end of the day, he's a professional, and he's going to play ball wherever he plays ball. And it wasn't one of those things where he's like a locker room cancer or anything like that, or hates it here and all this stuff and wants to get out. Like, it's very clear that he loves the team, loves the guys there. If a long-term deal were to come to fruition with the Raiders, he'd probably take it, but it's not something he's like actively pursuing. He just wants to go somewhere where he feels wanted. And so, like, that's a big reason why he wants out. And it's tough because, like, look, I don't think that's the type of guy that you want to send out the door, and obviously the team has been reluctant to do that, so he's one of those guys that, like, you want to build around, and bring more guys like him into the fold because he's a pro, he's handled this so well, he hasn't been a major distraction, any of that stuff, but he's making it known that he wants to go somewhere where he can get covered long-term and just have some stability career-wise for him. He's a dude that doesn't want to, be kind of a journeyman suitcase type of dude, and that was, I think, a big reason why he came to Vegas. He thought that he could have a long-term future here. And again, that hasn't transpired just yet. So the big question, do I think Jakobi Meyers gets traded? Yeah, I think he does at this point. I think entering the season, I didn't think that he was going to get traded, but after the way things have kind of gone and the fact that the Raiders are 2-5 right now, I could see him doing it. Again, he's in the last year of his deal. You want to get something for him. What's that going to look like? Who knows? Last year, they traded Davante Adams for a third-round pick. That was a conditional third-round pick. So what are you going to get for Jakobi? Is it going to be anything meaningful? Again, obviously, the season hasn't gone right, and if you do that, then you're admitting that you're in the middle of a rebuild. I don't think Pete and them are ready to admit that just yet, but everybody from the outside obviously sees what this is, and, it's a building year for them. So I think they do it just to get something in return. I also think the fact that Jack Besh is getting more of a look and getting more involved helps because Jack is going to basically do that Jakobi role. He's going to play inside, outside, and move in so many different positions along this, offense. I talked to Trey Tucker about that as well yesterday, and he noted the fact that, like, this is a guy that it's so tough for a young receiver to play that many roles, and he has wrapped his head around it very well, and again, just continues to get more and more work. Obviously, he's not there yet, but you draft a guy like him to eventually replace Jakobi Meyers, so the way the season has gone, what better time than now and get something in return for a guy that's probably going to walk in free agency anyway, the way things have gone. And also, too, there's the fact that, things haven't gone great for Jakobi Meyers. They haven't gone great for the team or the offense as a whole. Let's be completely honest about that. But in the first 3 weeks of the season, Jakobi was averaging 76 yards per game. And then the following 3 weeks after that, before he missed the last one there against the Chiefs, he only had 33 yards per game. So obviously the usage hasn't quite been there for him. He hasn't been involved. Teams have been able to take him away. So I think, look, hey, you go ahead and get rid of him, and get something in return for him. Now, having said that, personally, like if I was calling the shots, that's again not a guy I would want to send out the door. But you can do that just given the way things have kind of turned out for this team. And I also think it's interesting too that Tyler Lockett asked for his release from the Titans as well, and he was granted that. And now he can actually sign with any team at 1 o'clock Pacific today. So that's something to keep an eye on because obviously Pete and company have familiarity with him. Geno Smith has familiarity with him as well. So you could, trade a guy like Jakobi and bring in a Tyler Lockett who you have comfortability with and all those different things. And he could be that one of the veteran presence there in the locker room. And you kind of move forward and at least get something in return again for a guy that's probably going to walk. So if I had to put my money on it at this point, I would say Jakobi Meyers probably does get traded. On the other hand, though, what about Maxx Crosby? His name gets thrown in the hat each and every year when the Raiders aren't doing well. Again, that's happening now. Trey Wingo reported the Cowboys had inquired about Maxx Crosby. There's other reports out there saying that the Cowboys haven't reached out to the Raiders and haven't inquired about him. So it's a he said, she said type of deal. Look, I think anybody and everyone in the league probably inquires about Maxx Crosby. Like, do they always make that phone call? I don't know. There's probably discussions they have in-house, but like, who wouldn't want a guy like Maxx Crosby? Having said that, I'm going to sit here and say it right now, knowing that I very well may have to eat crow at some point, but I just don't think there's any way the Raiders trade Maxx Crosby. It would have to be a massive deal to do that, and the conversation has to start at 2 first-round picks. Otherwise, there's no way in hell that you make that move happen because Max is Mr. Raider. This is a guy you build a team around. This is a guy, when we talked to Levi about this as well, that, you let him be that dog, and that opens the door for so many other guys around him. Max is one of those dudes that wants to be here. He doesn't want to be traded. So, figure out how to make it work. And I also don't think that Mark Davis would ever sign off on a move like that unless it was some unbelievable haul. And I think, a lot of teams are probably going to throw some lowball offers out there to the Raiders, given the way things have gone for them. But I just don't think there's any way that they get rid of him. I don't think Pete gets rid of him. He is a team guy. He always comes in and says the right things. Is there some frustration on his part? Yeah, sure. Why could there not be after all these years of losing? But, this is a guy that loves being a Raider. He's got it freaking tatted on him. He's put up with a lot of really bad years. I just don't think this is the time that he trades him. I think it's just one of those lazy things for a lot of the national media to throw his name into the mix and all that stuff. I just don't see it happening. And if it does happen, yeah, sure, I'll look like an idiot. But hey, I think my read on is it being around this team as long as I have. I covered Max when he was drafted. This is a guy that every single coaching staff that's come in here has tried to take care of him. Excuse me, they're battling a bit of a cold here. But Max is that dude you build around. You build an entire defense around. So I just, man, did you not learn anything from trading Khalil Mack and all that different stuff? I know a lot of fans are saying oh, trade him, get what you can. No, that is not the move. That's going to set this team back so far. We've obviously seen the depth as an issue along that defensive line. So if you get rid of Max, it's going to get even worse for the defense. And so I think you keep him, you continue to build around him, and see if maybe when you are looking on the open market, you bring in somebody else that can help him out more along that defensive line. Obviously, things with Malcolm Kuntz haven't transpired the way you would hope. Tyree Wilson, inconsistent as well. And Jonah Lulu, too. He looked like he was turning a corner, but hasn't really quite worked out, from a consistent standpoint. So they need somebody opposite Max, but you do not get rid of him, especially in this conference, in this division, rather, where you have quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, and, Justin Herbert as well. Those are some dogs. And yes, I know I throw Bo Nix in there, but man, the kid has looked the part, in the first, season and a half for him. Keep a guy like Max. Continue playing that rush and cover game, or at least start playing it. But man, keep Max there. Otherwise, it is going to be a very, very, very long season for guys on the back end. So I don't think they end up trading Max. I do think Jakobi does end up getting traded. I think he gets what he wants, just given the fact that they're going to lose him probably at the end of the year anyway. I think it makes sense to move on from him. But enough of me just yapping about this type of stuff. It is the bye week, but we're still going to continue with our cadence of content here, at least on the podcast. So I want to bring in our homie Levi Edwards from the Raiders. He's their digital reporter. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with his work. He's a great dude, does a great job telling the story of the Raiders. So I wanted his take just kind of on how things have transpired for the Raiders through the first 7 weeks of the season. And as always, it was a great conversation. Levi's a good dude, so I was stoked to have him on the pod. So with that, guys, here's our conversation with our guy, Levi Edwards. All right, Levi, it's time to break down the first chunk of the season. As we talked about before we got it rolling, I hate that it's got to be after a loss like that to the Chiefs. But let's start there. Before we really kind of rehash the season as a whole so far, how do you wrap your head around what happened out there in KC?
Man, it is definitely something to wrap our heads around, just in the sense of, obviously there's times where obviously you're going to go into a game and you have to face a better team and they just play better on that day. What I saw in Kansas City was just a bit unusual, from the sense of not only just getting beat by a team that played better, but a
Yeah.
team that just plays with more energy, a team that uh, a team that just all around in so many different factors just looked better, in the sense of, obviously you want to keep things competitive, you want to play with a certain level of energy and a certain level of passion. And compared to any other game that I saw, even against the Colts when the Raiders lost 40
Yeah.
to 6, even I could see more energy and I could see more passion in that game to play than we did on Sunday. And I think that's the one thing that's a bit alarming, is not necessarily the score and what happened, but just kind of the lack of urgency and the lack of passion
Yeah.
I saw in the field. That's just not really reflective of a team that I've seen up to this point.
No, I would agree 100%. And it sucks to see that, as a media member covering the team against the team like the Chiefs. I mean, that's not one that's hard to get up for, that's for sure. Obviously, the rivalry and the history that those teams have. The Chiefs very clearly operating at a different level, that's for sure. They're not the same Chiefs team that we'd seen the first 3 weeks of the season. They are firing on all cylinders. Just in terms of the Raiders as a whole, it's been one of those seasons. This is one of those ones
Oh
where we're
yeah.
sitting there asking ourselves, are they worse than last year? What's the problem? All those different things. There's so much to really dive into. And I'm just curious for you now, as you look back at weeks 1 through 7, what's kind of going through your head now as you enter the bye week, and kind of what needs to change for this group? And are you shocked about what we've seen through the first 7 weeks of the season?
I'm not shocked, only from one standpoint, because I think this is definitely not what I expected coming out of training camp. I thought the
Mm-hmm.
team did look really well in training camp, in terms of being able to get things going and how they operated and the chemistry and everything that Pete's trying to build in the building. I was able to see that, so I'm a little shocked by how flat they've been playing. But I will say
Yeah.
that the thing that's not surprising to me is that coming into the season, as we saw in training camp, Jesse, this was a team that we knew was not the deepest in the NFL.
Yeah.
And this was a team that we knew, like, their starting units looked pretty good. The starting units played pretty well together. But once it got down to your second or third string guys, then that's when you started to notice some problems. And that was in practice, and that was in the preseason. You started to notice that those second, third string kind of guys, when they had to come in and, do some plug and play kind of things, then things kind of started to get a little bit wonky. And so I'm not surprised in that regard of how they played this year, only because of the injuries that have transpired. And you're counting on guys to play that didn't really necessarily perform to a certain standard within training camp or in the preseason. And the guys that are getting hurt, they're really important guys for your team.
Mm-hmm.
They're Brock Bowers and Jakobi Meyers and Maxx Crosby and Lonnie Johnson, who I thought was having a hell of a training camp until he got hurt.
Agreed.
These are guys that I felt are playing well, and then now you see Isaiah kind of go down in that last game, and he's dealing with his ankle thing. Adam Butler going down with his back thing. A lot of guys dealing with different things throughout the season. Not necessarily an injury-riddled team by any means, just the guys who are getting hurt are your key playmakers, and it is showing that in certain positions, the depth is not necessarily all the way there to make up for who's missing. And I think that was the most evident that we've ever seen it be in Kansas City this past weekend.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure. And Pete talked about that, the fact of the depth, and you can't use injuries as a crutch or anything like that. But I think it's just being real about the fact that, like, look, offensively, and that's where I kind of want to start with things here. They
Right.
haven't had Brock, and Brock has not been Brock since the second half of that game against the Patriots. And obviously, this team wanted to come out and run a lot of 12 personnel. Michael Mayer missed a lot of time. So I'm just curious to you, as we look at the offense. Obviously, things haven't transpired as the way that a lot of us probably thought was going to happen in terms of Geno Smith kind of raising their floor offensively. What do you think has been their biggest issue, and do you think they're still trying to find their identity?
Yeah, they're definitely still trying to find their identity. And I think that's what is very difficult to talk about in terms of what's been the problem with the offense. because I think obviously there's a lot of guys, they aren't ball knowers like us. So they just kind of look at how many interceptions Geno throws, and they look
Yeah.
at, how many rushing yards Ashton Jeanty does or doesn't have. And they're like, man, like these players are playing horrible. But there's so much to it than just that. And obviously Geno can play a little bit better. And Ashton is still trying to develop, within his vision and trying to figure out, what holes to run through and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, 12 personnel is something that I thought would be a little bit more prevalent because that's what we saw in training camp. We saw a lot of 12 and 13 personnel packages. But when you don't have Brock Bowers or Michael Mayer for certain stretches of the season, it gets difficult. Plus, on top of the fact that, you try to run these packages and then sometimes these teams are throwing blitzes at you that the tight end or the running back can't pick up, then, okay, well, now we can't run with this because we're not being able to pick up and pass protection the way that we need to with these guys that we expect to do this. So it becomes very difficult where you have something in plan that you want to work, but it's not. And I think with all the interceptions, kind of going back into what we're talking about with identity, is there's so many reasons as to why these interceptions are being thrown. And Greg Olsen even talked about that today in our coach scrums, where it's like, yeah, people point to Geno and his decision making can be better, but you also have to mention, okay, the offensive line, the pressure that's on Geno. You got to mention these young receivers. You have 2 rookie receivers who are playing right now, and you're still trying to figure out, route concepts and where they need to be and timing and pacing. And then also Ashton Jeanty is another one of those guys who's still trying to figure things out within route running and where to be, and they want to give them one-on-one opportunities and things of that nature. So I think the problem is not just Geno just going out there and playing bad football. I think the offense right now is just not married as a whole, and that's reflective within the 10 interceptions Geno has thrown.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's something that a lot of people are saying, well, like, is it Geno? Is it the development of the guys around him? And Geno has said that many times that, like, they're still developing. That should be something that I think is okay to be able to say, right? Because there's just so much newness around this team.
Yeah, no, it's funny because people ask me, like, is it Geno or is it the offensive line? I just say yes. You don't have an answer. You can't throw one person under the bus over the other. No. Like, it's not. It doesn't have to be a either thing. It could be an either or kind of situation. It doesn't have to be. You point blame to one person. What I'm not going to do is come on here and say, oh, well, Geno's playing horrible football and that's why he's throwing all these interceptions. Yeah. I think the timing and the pace of the offense could be a lot better. But something that is encouraging is the fact that Geno Smith is a veteran quarterback, and these things, hopefully over time, while we have, how many, 8-9 games left of the season, I would hope that these things get figured out as the talent around him continues to grow and you get guys who are healthy coming back. But it's just been really difficult now, especially with such a young team and a new offensive coordinator. It's tough.
Yeah, no, it really is. And so I'm curious for you, like, what needs to change coming out of the bye week? Like, what's something that fans can point to and kind of give Raider Nation some hope here offensively? What can and needs to change to help this team turn things around and look more like the squad we saw in the second half there against the Patriots?
Just based off of everything that I've seen with Chip Kelly, even dating back to Oregon, dating to UCLA, his time, like everywhere he's been, he's like to have these fast, explosive offenses. And it's all about, pace and timing. And I think something that can be, something that can be easily cleaned up with this team is just playing faster. Yep. And I think that's easier said than done because he's a new offensive coordinator. You're still trying to figure out, the ins and outs of this playbook. And I think that's what's so funny. I think a lot of people just assume like, okay, a new offensive coordinator comes in and you have your install in training camp and then you should be good to go, by the time the season starts. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And you even saw that in Chicago where it's like, yeah, you get Ben Johnson as your head coach. He's supposed to be this, offensive guru calling plays, and you saw everything he did in Detroit. Well, guess what? He had years to install that in Detroit, and that's why they were so good at it. And now they're starting to pick things up in Chicago after having a rough start to the season. So it's the same thing with the Raiders and their offenses. They have a new offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, who has I don't want to say the most intricate playbook, but it is very precise in timing and how you do things in a certain way, very meticulous in the way that you do things. And you got to pick up the pace. You got to think, you got to be free within the way that you do things. And I think the Raiders right now, offensively speaking, are doing that to the level of which you would like to see. And so if they can just kind of get that together, play faster and be more comfortable and confident in what they do, then I think that's a very easy fix. And that can be attributed to all 11 men on the field, offensive line, Geno, receivers, and running backs.
Yeah, I think at that point, like, just keep it simple and increase the pace, because that's obviously, what brought Chip Kelly to prominence, obviously at Oregon and things. And his offense has definitely changed, since his time, when he was the head coach in Philly, and then obviously going back to college, and then his working his way back up and all that stuff. So there are more pro style elements mixed in there. But to me,
Sure.
he has always been at his best when there has been pace involved, and I think they can do that with a guy like Geno at the helm and keep things simpler on the guys, on the outside, and just get him the ball in space, really. And speaking of
Yeah.
space, we've seen Ashton Jeanty fare pretty well when he has room to run. I'm curious how you kind of look at and grade Ashton Jeanty through the first 7 weeks of the season, and what his development has been like for you.
I think it's just such a tricky question just because
Yeah.
of the fact that I think that all of the things that Ashton Jeanty is really good at, we've seen it, and we can definitely tell, like, okay, this is a really good running back, and he has a lot of potential, and he runs hard, he has great contact balance, and all the things that you'd want. I just think he's still growing and he's learning, just like any other rookie in the league. But also, I think not only just the offensive line could play better, but I also believe that play calling can be a little bit catered more towards him. And I know a lot of people were, kind of upset about him not getting as many carries as he did against, Kansas City. But when you think about it, I mean, like how many opportunities that the Raiders even have the ball to
Yeah.
begin with on Sunday for
30
Ashton
total
Jeanty to even.
snaps. I
It's
mean,
like 30 snaps. Like, oh, you
yeah.
want Ashton Jeanty to get all these carries, or it's like, I mean, if you give him the ball 6 times out of 30, I mean, he's still getting the ball a good bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I think play calling needs to be catered a little bit more to his strengths. Something I noticed in training camp, and you saw it, Jesse, like the amount of screens that they were able to
Yeah.
draw up for him, a lot of the one-on-one matchups they were able to draw up for him in the passing game. And this was a guy that I thought would be a lot more involved within doing things like that. And we've seen it be successful when they do call it for him, but I feel like they don't call it nearly as much as what we would have expected it. And I'm not saying Ashton Jeanty has to be the whole offense. He doesn't have to put the whole team on his back as a rookie, but I think that obviously the offensive line can do some things to help him out to really maximize on his full potential. And I also think that play calling could definitely help him as well. And I think obviously Chip Kelly talked about there being an acclimation period of wanting to ease him in. And I get that. I understand it.
Yeah.
But definitely now going into the second half of the season, you really got to do whatever it takes to maximize on a guy that you took number 6 overall.
Yeah. Throw the load management out the window. It's week
Load
7's in the
management is
books.
out the window, dog.
Yeah.
Like we got to get him the ball.
Exactly.
I didn't notice any type of load management last year with Brock Bowers
No.
at all. If anybody was doing too much, it was Brock last year. So obviously it's a team game, but your best players make the best plays, and that's what they got to do. They got to get the ball in the hands of their best players.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And we talked about it, like you said, throughout training camp, all that stuff. Obviously, you date back to Jeanty's career in college, his junior year, led all of college football in receiving yards by a running back as well. So, like, get the guy involved. We did see it in camp. I'm really surprised that we haven't seen that at more of a clip. Obviously, you go back to the game against the Colts. I believe it was the first play. They hit him, on that wheel route, if I remember right, out of the backfield on, like, the first play. So there have been some times, but I think even just going back and looking at the Chiefs, their strategy, they mixed in so many screens. We're getting the ball to a guy like Rashee Rice like that and let him get to work, let him get into a rhythm and get comfortable. I do think there is something to that where it's like it doesn't even necessarily have to be in the running game. It's just like get the ball to Jeanty and let him get into a bit of a rhythm, right?
Yeah, you got and running back and quarterback are those two positions in football where rhythm is everything, where they have to be high volume kind of players for them to actually be able to hit their stride and do things. Because if you give them inconsistent opportunities, they're never going to get in the right rhythm and the right pace to actually do things. And like I said, I'm not saying give the ball to Ashton Jeanty a million times. What I'm saying is that there needs to be a little bit more, strategy in how you give him the ball in these one-on-one situations. Because every time that I've noticed Ashton Jeanty has the ball in a one-on-one situation, he's making somebody miss or he's just running them the hell over. And then you have the second or third guy that has to come over and make the tackle. Ashton Jeanty's still leading the league in tackles right now, in broken tackles right now, with 15. So for a rookie leading the league in broken tackles, that just shows you not only just how tough he is, but also the fact of the matter is that he's not getting a whole lot of time, coming out of the backfield. And also when you do have him in one-on-one opportunities, then he's going to make something happen. He's going to make somebody miss.
Yeah, when he's got room in front of him, or at least vision, he's making at least one guy miss, like you said, or lowering that shoulder and bringing the boom. So they got to figure out a way to do that more. One more on the offense before we transition to the defense here. You mentioned Brock Bowers. How do things change for this group with a healthy Brock Bowers coming out of the bye week?
And we saw it in week one. That was the only time that we've had a healthy Brock Bowers, when he had the most quiet 103-yard, 5-catch
Yeah,
game I've ever seen. Where you look at the stat sheet, and he had a couple of big catches, but it's like you look at the box sheet, and he had that, and he didn't play the fourth quarter.
yeah,
So he really did all of his damage in three quarters, and he looked like the guy that we saw last year, and he looked like the guy that we saw in training camp again. And we know Geno Smith really likes to get his tight ends involved, and that's been something that he's done even in Seattle. So I think getting a healthy Brock Bowers is going to be huge, because we saw what it did for the team in New England against a now 5-2 New England Patriots defense that's now taking huge strides with some good players. So we've seen what they can do at full strength with Brock, and getting him healthy is going to be huge, because everyone could see just how limited he was in those games where he did play against the Commanders and against the Chargers. He just wasn't the same player. He wasn't creating the same separation. Just didn't look the part. Not like, not saying that he still wasn't productive, but
yeah,
he wasn't the guy that he can be. So getting him back healthy is huge. And honestly, I think that they made the right decision sitting him out these last 3 games and letting him get to
definitely.
full strength, instead of just letting him play on a knee that just continued to linger and linger throughout the season. And we saw that last year with Maxx Crosby, where he was trying to play on an ankle that wasn't full go, and he kept on, doing what he could do and leading the defense, and he still played really good football until the ankle gave out against the Buccaneers, and he still had to end up getting surgery.
Yeah. No, sometimes you got to save these guys from themselves. Like you said, Brock was not Brock, and that's an injury deal. Not that he isn't that same player. It's just he's not that guy when he's not fully healthy. You can't go
Absolutely.
taking a race car out there with a flat tire. It's not going to be the same deal. So defensively now, let's talk about that a bit. Obviously, they had been really solid on the first drive against a lot of teams, and then as the game wore on, the longer they're out there, the kind of things kind of wear down. Obviously, that wasn't the case early on in the game against the Chiefs, and things have kind of turned south a bit for them as a whole. The last handful of games here. Where have you seen the biggest change? In a bad direction for the defense, and how the heck do they fix that?
I think within the defense, complementary football is going to mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think outside of the Chiefs game, where they were able to, the Chiefs went down the field 4 times in a stretch
Yeah.
of 80 to 90 yards. Outside of that game, the defense has not really had the greatest field position. They're always getting the ball kind of like near, they're always getting on the field like around the 40 or the 50, because either, there's a turnover, or special teams doesn't really necessarily play the best complementary football. So I think the defense kind of gets a bad break. I think they've been a really good bend or don't break kind of
Uh-huh.
team. I think the big thing that they can definitely improve on is red zone defense. I
Yeah.
think that that's something that can definitely be improved tremendously, because if you look at the game against the Colts, once again, really bad field position. But if you look at how many yards they allowed to the Indianapolis Colts, it wasn't a whole lot.
No.
It wasn't a really bad defensive showing. The problem is that they allowed 4 red zone touchdowns off of in the run game, which is just something that can't happen. So obviously, horrible game that gets out of reach, 40-6. But if you turn 4 of those touchdowns into 3 points, and you keep your team in the game and try not to like completely give away momentum, it's a very different game. And so I think, especially for a young unit, very inexperienced unit, I think they've played pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos to Patrick Graham for really getting those guys right. However, the offenses they're going to face are only going to continue to get better throughout the second half of the season, and they got to be ready. And they can't let 7 get on the board when you can get off the field and only be 3.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, and it'll go in turn with the offense needs to stay out there longer to give them a breather.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. When the offense is going 3 and out, and that's what we noticed last year.
yeah,
Honestly, like last year, the Raiders defense. I know it's a different year, completely different team, but that's
yeah,
something I noticed last year. Was like in 2024, that was a really good defense, and they
yeah,
played really well. And then the offense would just have so many issues where they couldn't stay on the field, and then by the time you get to the fourth quarter, that defense is gassed, and
exactly.
they would have spent the whole game giving up about 9 or 12 points. Then it just gets out of control in the fourth because they're on the field, they're tired, and then things get out of hand. And I think that that's been a big issue as well this year for the Raiders defense, where they're on the field so much. Where yes, they can play better, and there are a lot of things that they can do to improve. I'm not saying that, but I really do truly believe that playing complementary football will benefit them tremendously, because I just don't personally believe that they've been that bad this year.
Yeah, I mean, look at the game against the Titans, and I know the Titans are a horrible team, but they played complementary football. The defense
Absolutely.
looked so much better. They were able to get aggressive as well, mix in more man coverage. I think that's something I'd like to see a bit more from this group too. I know that they're a heavy zone team, but figure out a way to get a little stickier in coverage because I know fans are really frustrated just about the soft zone, which goes into part with the whole bend but don't break thing. But just what's your take on the coverages that we've seen and the way Patrick Graham has employed them? In terms of like, look, there is a lot of room for guys out there, but I think that's part of that cover three scheme. And again, that bend but don't break deal.
I think that once again, it definitely starts up front, where I
Yeah,
truly believe that the defensive line that we have seen, I think, has been a great run stopping defensive line, and they have some
definitely.
really good players up there that have been able to set the edge and do some things, go through their gaps, all those kind of things, and that front seven with the linebackers as well included, really good at stopping the run. However, the pass rush has just not been what we would have expected it to be at this point. And so I believe that a lot of these opposing quarterbacks, when I see them in the pocket, they have a lot of time to kind of do things, and it allows for the receivers to eventually get open, and it puts our cornerbacks and our safeties in a really bad spot. So I really truly believe that there needs to be a little bit of a larger emphasis on making sure that the pass rush is fortified. In the second
Yeah,
half of the season, that way, these cornerbacks, like a Caillou Blue Kelly or Darian Porter, Eric Stokes, they're not put in these really bad situations. If you're getting after the quarterback and you're not giving him any time, then obviously that's going to limit, the decision making process for the quarterback. And so I'd like to see a better pass rush to help out the corners. And something that I thought we would see a little bit more of as well is pressing up.
yeah,
And that was something that I feel like Pete Carroll talked about. What Patrick Graham wanted to do. I felt like the corners would be playing a little bit more press than we've seen. And I'm not necessarily sure if that's just something that they feel like it's a personnel thing, or if that's just kind of like not what they want to do. I don't know what it is on that. So I do think that the corners that we do have are pretty physical.
yeah.
Even if you throw DeCamerion Richardson in there, I think he's a pretty physical corner as well. So I would like to see those guys kind of press up a little bit more and kind of like try to make sure that they take away some of the things to kind of get downfield right off the gate. And I know you can't press up on guys too early. The whole 5 yard rule, all of those things. I've never played corner. That's the
Yeah.
last position I've ever want to play in football is corner. But I would like to see a little bit more press with guys who are a little bit more physical at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, no, I would agree because like, look, let's be completely real about this. They've got guys with big frames out there. Let them use that frame. Get the hands on them.
Absolutely.
Get collision them a bit. I'd like to see that, even if they are bailing in cover three. I think that'd be something that would be really cool to be able to see from that group. We'll get out of here on this one, Levi. It comes around every year. Maxx Crosby and the whole trade rumor thing.
Yeah.
Is there any world where the Raiders trade Maxx Crosby?
I'm only going to go off of what I know right now, and I'm not going to speak for the future. I'm
Yeah.
not going to speak for what could happen, but at the moment right now, it just doesn't seem that way.
No, hell
Strictly
no.
just
Say it with your chest.
strictly,
Hell no.
nah, dog. Like it's just not going to happen right now.
Yeah.
And that's what's so crazy is it's one of those things where it won't show up on the stat sheet necessarily, but I think Maxx Crosby's still playing some really good football.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing a lot of things that just aren't noticed because we're now just in this era of football where if you're an edge rusher, you don't have a million sacks.
Yeah.
You're just playing like crap. And that's just not true.
No.
Maxx Crosby has 10 tackles for loss. That's the second most tackles for loss in the league behind Brian Burns. And he's done that consistently, year after year after year now, where he's setting the edge, he's stopping the run. I truly believe he's one of the best run stopping edge rushers in the league. And I think that's been prevalent than ever this year. And so he's still leading the league. He's still leading the team in sacks with Jonah Laulu with 4.
Yeah.
He still has the quarterback hits. He's still getting pressure. And there's so many offensive lines that are just doing so much to deploy against him, and he can only do so much, which is what we saw. That's how he got hurt against the Chiefs, is the chop block.
The screening, the cuts, all of it, yeah.
They're throwing so much at Maxx Crosby, and he still has the production he has, which is very impressive. So when it comes down to it, those other guys need to step up. And I'm not saying that they haven't. I'm just saying that when you have a guy like Maxx Crosby on one side of the line that they have to worry about, that means if you have a one-on-one matchup on the other side, you got to win it. If you're Thomas Booker, you got a one-on-one matchup against the center or against your guard, you got to win it. If you're Malcolm Kuntz or you're Tyree Wilson, you're on the other side of the edge, you got a one-on-one matchup against the blind side, you got to win it. That's just point blank, period. And I always make this joke. I even made this joke today where Aaron Donald got more edge rushers paid than anyone else in the NFL that I've seen. Because if you're Aaron Donald, still having the production that you have, but you're getting double teamed, triple teamed every play. That's just the kind of player Aaron Donald was, which means that if you are next to him and you have a one-on-one matchup, guess what? 9 times out of 10, I'm going to make sure I win my one-on-one matchup because I know that this guy next to me is drawing so much attention. And I think that's going to be the next step for the defensive line is making sure that all of those guys next to Maxx Crosby are winning their one-on-one matchups. And I know that was such a super long answer to a trade question, and I'm sorry about that, but
you're good,
that's what it comes down to, man. Like the defensive line, they just have to play complementary football next to Maxx because it's not all on him. So he doesn't have all the sacks in the world, but guess what? Malcolm Kuntz could, or Thomas Booker could, Tyree Wilson could. All of these guys, they could, they can impact the game just as much as Maxx does just by the opportunities that they're given. So hopefully we can see that more in the second half of the season.
Yeah, the way when we've seen this defense playing at its peak, it's when the other role players along the D line are taking advantage of those looks that Maxx creates for them, like 100%. There's no way around that. So, they definitely need to step up. And I think that was something I personally thought we were going to see them coming in waves a lot more than we have.
Absolutely.
We need to see it more from a guy like Jonah Laulu, too. He started kind of looking like he was really turning a corner in terms of the consistency and then maybe faded a bit there. So, that's something that I definitely think needs to happen coming out of the break. And again, you're not going to get rid of Maxx just because then it's like then all that what you've got up front, you can't do that. Like you build around a guy like that. Did nobody learn anything about trading Khalil Mack? That's the thing that gets me.
We don't even have to look that far back. We can look at Dallas. Dallas is looking for that dominant edge rusher, to get after quarterbacks. So it's like, well, you had it, and then you traded him. So, whether it's Khalil Mack or Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, Maxx Crosby, whoever, you got to make sure that you have that guy on your line that is going to draw that attention, and then everybody else just goes out and they do their job. And don't let history repeat itself.
Nah. Today's game is all about rush and cover. You're not going to get rid of a guy that can rush like he can. I lied. I do have one more for you. You mentioned Darian Porter in there. I'm curious. Do you think he makes his move? Do you think we see Darian Porter coming out as a starter out of the bye, or what's your read on that?
That is a damn good question, Jesse.
Yeah.
I really do think that the coaching staff is still pretty, I don't want to say sold on Caillou Blue, but I still think that there's some meat on the bone with Caillou. And I think if anything, Caillou's had some games where he's looked really good, and then he's had some games where, he's allowed a lot of passing yards. And I think they want to see a little bit more consistency from him because they know what he's capable of. So, and that's the other thing with Darian Porter is I think a lot of people see Darian and they're like, okay, big, long, fast corner. he's got to be amazing. And why isn't he starting? And
Mm-hmm.
Caillou's playing like this and all this stuff. People don't realize Darian Porter is now in his 4th year of his life playing
Yeah.
cornerback. Like, he did not play cornerback in Pop Warner. He did not play cornerback in high school. He did not play cornerback until his academic junior season
Yeah.
at Iowa. So his redshirt sophomore year, that is when he started playing cornerback. He had never played before in his life. And now he's in the NFL 3 years after picking up this position. He's still learning how to play it. And so, yes, Darian Porter will be good in time. And I just don't want to see the Raiders rush this process. If they feel like he's not ready yet, if they need to see a little bit more out of him, if he needs to continue being a special teams guy, let them do that. And even Darian Porter wasn't perfect in training camp, as we both saw. There's still some things he's trying to figure out. There's a couple of times where he got beat by Dante. There's a couple of times, any quarterback's going to get beat. Cornerback's going to get beat. So this is a guy that I think has a lot of potential, a lot of promise, and I do think he will get a lot more reps in the second half of the season. But I do not want to see the Raiders rush the process with this guy who they're still trying to, pretty much learn how to play this position. Because he only had 3 years to play in college, and he's damn sure not going up against the same receivers in college that he's going up against in the NFL.
No,
so
I like that take because it's a take of patience, and obviously in today's NFL, like patience is not a virtue for a lot of fans, And I think it's important to put that into perspective. Personally, I'd like to see him out there, but I think that's a really good way to approach it. Like you said, like this is a guy that's just learning it, and like at the end of the day too, like corner, it's one of those positions where you got to be a complete psycho and have the shortest memory in the world, and you don't want to see a young player get taken out of it mentally if they're just getting cooked early on. Not that he necessarily would, but you protect him a bit. I like that take. Levi, as we get you out of here, I'm curious, man. I know it's the bye week. What do you got cooking? Are you just taking off, going and resetting? Like, what can people look out for you this week?
Really, we have a couple more stories that I'm working on that's going to be on Raiders.com. They're going to be some pretty solid stuff. We have a Raider Nation origin story coming out. Which, is an article series we do just on fans within Raider Nation. We have another interesting story about a coach who's on our coaching staff that a lot of people may not necessarily know much about. But it's a pretty new coach who has a little bit of history already with the Raiders already as an organization. So I'll leave it at that.
I like it. That's a deep tease. That's what we call it in the biz.
It's a guy who's new to coaching, but not new to the Raiders. Let me put it like that. I'm really excited for that to come out as well. That's been the question, man. Everybody's been asking me what I'm doing for the bye week. Like, everybody thinks I'm about to just, hop on a plane and head to Cancun for the bye week, man. And like, Jesse, in this industry, covering sports, like sometimes you just need to sit down and not do anything.
Just stare at a wall.
Just stare at a wall, stare at a box. Like, there was some football playing out of the box, you know what I'm saying? Like college football, just sit down, chill, reset, and that's my thing with vacation, where it's like, when I go on vacation, I'm usually going and, hanging out with friends. And then I feel more tired coming back from vacation while I'm with my friends than I did if I would have just sat at home and not did anything.
Yeah. You need a vacation from the vacation sometimes.
Need a vacation from the vacation. I'll take the vacation once the season is over, once we're in February and in March, that's when the vacation will come. But right now, this is more just rest and relaxation. I just need to sit and not do anything and just chill, just play around on my phone and watch college football and get ready for the Jaguars. That's all I'm trying to do.
I love it, man. I hope you get some time to rest and recover. Thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast. We really do appreciate it, man.
Man, I appreciate you asking me, Jesse, man. It means a lot.
Hey, Levi's the man. We're so fired up that he joined us and obviously gave some really good perspective as well. So make sure you guys go check him out if you haven't already. Like I said, does a great job covering the team and has some really interesting profiles week in and week out. Love the guy's work. In the meantime, guys, I do want to mention one more time, make sure you do check us out online at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to that free newsletter. And also like and subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you guys are watching or listening to us. And if you like what you heard, hit us with that 5-star review and leave a comment as well. In the meantime, guys, we do appreciate you watching and listening. Like I said before, we are going to have our normal cadence of podcasts here on Friday. We're going to be doing our normal Raiders Rounder segment with Matt, but we're going to go a little bit deeper and get his take on the Raiders and how things have transpired for them from a betting perspective as well, but also take another look at all the games from the week that was. Matt's been pretty good, and I think if you've been following him, he's been making some pretty good money for you guys. So hopefully you've been paying attention to him. I love his perspective. He's a good football mind too. So we will be back on the show with us on Friday. In the meantime, though, guys, take it easy. Enjoy the bye week, and we'll see you on Friday.